Great. So now we welcome keynote speaker Dana Mahr. Dana is an assistant professor for public participation in medicine at the University of Geneva. Her research centers on how marginalized social groups interact with the normative aspects of biomedical technologies. She is a member of the scientific advisory board of QueerAltern in Zurich, and as a transgender person active in the LGBTQIA+ activism in Switzerland.
So thank you very much for the introduction and for the opportunity to share some of our work with you. I think I go directly into media res. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I just need to share the slides with you if you don't have the slides on the general presentation. Voila, you should see it now. Do you see it? Okay, thank you. So a few months ago, my partner said something which shocked me. I hope you would die before me, she proclaimed. I was disturbed and asked her why. She would say that she was afraid that I entered a retirement home, care facility, or hospice, and she was no longer there to advocate and observe for me. I might experience prejudice or even abuse. This confession has been with me ever since. Although I'm a professional and activist in dealing with the issues of old age, I had not yet thought about my own future as an older trans person. Care in institutions for the elderly can be understood as an area of the manifestation of biopower as described by the French philosopher Michel Foucault in the 1970s. For Foucault, sexuality and gender lie precisely at the junction between the individual disciplining of the body and behavior and the normative regulation of a society's population. It is precisely at this point of intersection that what a human being should be and must be emerges. This idea is fueled by a social and medical scientific idea of what is perceived as normal. The thesis of this keynote presentation is that elderly transgender persons feel particularly vulnerable to such normalizing disciplining. The validity of their bodies and their gender identity is and has been very fragile, both from a historical and a sociological perspective. Even though great progress has been made worldwide since the 1980s, as can be seen in the psychological classification of gender dysphoria, a new cultural struggle for their existence has re-emerged in the last few years, whether as a consequence of the Trump administration and other neoconservative governments on transgender rights, or the influence of very conservative media figures like Ben Shapiro. Being transgender has led to a new moral panic. Transgender persons and their allies are increasingly framed as anti-biological propagandists, morally deviant, or even sex offenders in disguise. This form of prejudicial labeling and the moral judgments implied therein might make life particularly difficult for older transgender individuals, given that such characterizations could easily have an effect on the quality of their future care. Younger transgender people might be able to stand up for themselves even in difficult circumstances, demonstrate resilience, ingenuity, and perseverance. This is not always possible for older persons. However, from a medical point of view or due to social isolation. Other factors that may hinder the elderly LGBTQIA+ population in receiving appropriate and dignified care is that they might have been ostracized by their birth family, or their family support is very small. To further complicate matters, oftentimes their chosen family might be dwindling, as observed, for example, by the loss of dear ones in the course of the HIV/AIDS crisis of the 1980s and 1990s. In order to shed light on the concerns that transgender persons have about care in senior years, in the current social climate, I divide this presentation into two sections. The first section is based on surveys conducted by the Transgender Network Switzerland and myself. Here I will present some of the concerns and views of transgender individuals on the issue and show how pioneers currently entering the age of retirement can pave the way for future generations in an authentic fashion. Finally, in the second part, I will outline why I believe that inclusive care for transgender people is also a particular challenge for the conceptualization and implementation of personalized health. Okay. The Stonewall generation of the transgender population are once again serving as ambassadors and champions of their own identity with their current entry into the retirement age and possible need for care. Their own political and social activism has contributed to the very conditions that make the idea of providing appropriate care for elderly LGBTQIA+ people possible in the first place. In contrast to the previous generations that were largely invisible in the care system, they now have social activists such as the association QueerAltern as allies. In addition, they are also able to cooperate with medical practitioners that approach the politics of difference in research, medical practice, and care against the backdrop of the ideal of inclusion. Characteristically, this perspective underlines, as the sociologist of health Stephen Epstein writes, the assumption that social identities correspond to relatively distinct kinds of bodies, such as female bodies, Asian bodies, Latinx bodies, and transgender bodies in different stages of transition. Research on inclusion in the care system has been pursued and implemented in recent years. This implementation can be observed particularly at the interface between cultural identity and race. Lunch versus halal, the respectful handling of religious views, taboos or holidays, or the understanding of culturally differentiated family structures are now commonplace in nursing homes in the USA, in Europe, and also in many Asian countries. The same applies to the different needs of racially diverse care recipients with regard to different reactions to drugs or forms of manifestation of disease. The discussion of culture-sensitive care for older LGBTQIA+ individuals, their oftentimes non-traditional families, and physical needs is still in its infancy stage. Empirical data on LGBTQIA+ individuals are in general, and transgender individuals in particular in nursing homes, are yet rare. Their fruitful collection and analysis depends on how activists, transgender care recipients from the Stonewall generation, medical professionals, care professionals, and the political system interact with each other in the upcoming years. It is only through the inclusion of the experiences of those who live trans bodies and trans identities that knowledge and know-how can be produced that might enable future generations of transgender people to receive dignified and appropriate care in old age. Important components for this are, on the one hand, education and sensitization for care workers, and on the other, the possibility, readiness, as well as the will of care recipients to share their knowledge and experience in an authentic way. It is also important, in my eyes, that this knowledge is translated into specific and scientific and political discourse and transformed into appropriate policies. The normative goal of this translation and implementation is to prevent transgender individuals from becoming objects of biopolitical interventions, and also to give them the ability to become participatory actors in the practical production of new approaches towards care in old age. A first step in such direction has been taken in Switzerland by the associations Pink Cross and TGNS. Both have conducted surveys and commissioned studies in recent years to measure the views of LGBTQIA+ individuals on the care system for elderly persons living in Switzerland. All these studies highlight a significant fear of having their bodies and identities disciplined in care situations. An interview study by the transgender activist Henry Hohmann and myself explores this along the following questions. What does getting older mean to you as a transgender person? And how do you want to live in old age? Second question, which problem horizons concern you when you think about care structures in old age? Third question, in your opinion, how are nursing homes prepared for the care of elderly transgender persons? What do you think should be done to provide dignified care to aging transgender individuals? And the fourth question, do you think there should be specialized care facilities for elderly LGBTQIA+ people? 44 individuals from the transgender community living in Switzerland took part in this survey. Their ages were between 20 and 72 years. Of those interviewed, 40% identified as female, 24% as male, and 5% as non-binary, genderqueer, or intersexual. The rest abstained from disclosing their gender identity. The median age of the participants was 56 years. When asked about the meaning of age from the perspective of transgender individuals, it becomes clear that transgender persons strongly associate their identity with the expression of their perceived and openly lived gender expression. They evaluate the expression of this identity as an achievement that, unlike other people, they had to fight for against much social resistance for all their lives. As a result, one of the interviews stated that in old age, she does not want to have to explain herself to other people in order to avoid the feeling of being perceived not as a normal person, but as a strange being. Another person stated that it is important to him not to lose everything he had achieved in the many years of his life when entering a care facility. This statement too does not aim at material goods or social status, but refers to the core identity of the experienced gender. Another trans feminine person stated that she was afraid of dementia. After all, she does not want to, and now I quote, mentally relapse into her socially indoctrinated childhood and youth. With regard to the existing care structures, the interviews expressed a number of concerns, which on the one hand focused on access to transgender-specific pharmaceuticals and medical devices, and on the other hand, they anticipated various scenarios of possible discrimination. From a structural perspective, the interviews emphasized the desire for the continuation of hormone replacement therapies and the continued professional use of technical aids for surgically transitioned care recipients as central requirements of transgender inclusive care facilities. This includes, among other things, the handling of pumps in connection with penile implants, prothesis and epithesis, or stents and dialyzers for the care of neovaginas. Well-trained nursing staff are a prerequisite for this, although it is feared that these extra qualifications might not be paid for by the health insurance companies here in Switzerland. In addition, experiences of discrimination made in the course of life are extrapolated into the care context. Another person stated that he or she is afraid of being placed in a, now I quote again, heteronormative everyday life and a binary reference system. Quote ends, which is a justifiable concern in the specifically gendered care structures of many nursing homes of the present day. Other people are afraid of being addressed by the wrong personal pronouns or of becoming victims of derogatory speech or of being reduced to their outward genitalia. Further, the loss of resilience and the loss of the ability to defend oneself is discussed by one of the interviewees. He says, and now I quote again, "I would be afraid that a person in need of care, I would no longer be able to defend myself against hostile statements or even physical violence." In assessing whether the existing nursing homes in Switzerland are prepared for elderly transgender persons, the interviews focused in particular on knowledge about and attitude towards LGBTQIA+ issues. It is not only a matter of having the appropriate nursing expertise, but above all, it must be ensured that nursing contexts are a safe space. One person, for example, replied to us that transgender inclusion is not only a problem of the institution, but primarily a challenge for the mental attitude of the staff. Another person raised this concern in view of the demographic situation in the Swiss care sector. She writes to us in an email, now I quote again, "There are many geriatric nurses here who have migrated to Switzerland from cultures where trans identity is a taboo or even religiously persecuted crime." End citation. This is not, in my eyes, to be seen as a racist phrase, but an intersectional problem which will be an important task for the care sector in the coming years. The idea for LGBTQIA+ specific retirement homes was received by the respondents with ambivalent feelings. On the one hand, they argued for the establishment of special nursing homes because of the aspect of security against discrimination and the possibility to grow old together with other LGBTQIA+ individuals. On the other hand, this could also lead, so some of them told us, to an apartheid between LGBTQIA+ people and the heterosexual cisgender majority society. This should be avoided at all costs, so they say, as both population groups should learn from and about each other even in old age. Aging is an ever greater challenge for transgender persons than for other parts of the population. As the survey has shown, the preservation and appreciation of their transgender identity in care contexts is of utmost importance. To this end, it is important for them that professionals and their institutions are prepared for them, trained for their special needs, and meet with them without prejudice, whether within retirement homes or outpatient care. They do not want to be ghettoized, but to be understood as normal and valid members of the population in need of care. To make this possible, the association QueerAltern was founded in Zurich. It acts as a link between the LGBTQIA+ community, its organizations, political actors, and care institutions. The goal is to establish intergenerational social and political capital in order to support LGBTQIA+ people in their later years and to provide educational formation for care institutions. Special attention will be paid to creating infrastructures and networks for the needs of older LGBTQIA+ people and their partners. Furthermore, the association is committed to a social rethinking so that LGBTQIA+ people do not have to go back into the closet when they are in need of geriatric care. Among the first successes of the association are very active so-called caring communities and collaboration with the city of Zurich to establish an LGBTQIA+ friendly living space for elderly people in the Espenhof of the city Zurich. Its motto is to be Espenhof, we live diversity. In their 2019 article, Precision Medicine in the Aging World, Italian systems medicine researcher Silvia Riondino and her colleagues described the collection of large amounts of data on older populations as an imperative for the future of geriatric care and geriatric research. In their eyes, these data are particularly important for keeping the cost of the health system in aging Western societies under control. Multimorbidity, chronic diseases, and disabilities in this population group should be countered with optimized and personalized therapeutic interventions to reduce prescriptions, promote prevention, and foster efficiency. For this purpose, patients and residents of nursing homes should be classified, so they say, by using a risk model based on health data that is analyzed by machine learning. Such algorithm should process information like age, comorbidities, pharmaceutical specificities, fitness profiles, and biomarkers. A model of personalized health and care like that of Riondino and her colleagues understands individualization of health in the mode of optimization for one or more specific goals. For example, one goal may be the reduction of the cost of care, while another may be the prevention of over-medicalization of particular pre-identified risk groups. This is reductionist in the sense that patients and care recipients are understood solely as the sum of their medical data and risk factors. Their identity, their life history, and their experiential knowledge are largely excluded. Can this model be used to reform geriatric care to meet the needs of vulnerable populations, such as transgender individuals? I do not believe this is possible or even desirable. Rather, I believe it is necessary to reconnect the new data-centered understanding of personalized care with a classical model of person-centered medicine and care. The example of the feedback of the surveyed transgender individuals shows very clearly in my eyes that it is imperative for this population that care and medical interventions be designed to preserve their identities. The experience of being transgender should therefore become the starting point for nursing care, since the identity linked to it has often emerged from a lifelong struggle for acceptance and recognition. Only by starting from the aforementioned premise can certain medical needs be derived. The benefit of continuing a hormone replacement therapy may not be reflected in one's own data twin. And yet it is essential for many transgender persons of age. The same applies for the human aspect of care. Persons that identify as transgender want to be treated with respect and understanding even in old age. To achieve this, it is important to establish educational training and resources for professionals working in the care sector and in the political field. The activities of QueerAltern and other advocacy groups are a good start, but many more steps must eventually follow. This includes an inclusive approach to personalized health. So, thank you very much. This is from my perspective, and I'm open for discussion, and I'm very excited to be part of the working groups this evening and to interact with all of you. Thank you.